Good morning, Newton Falls. Hello, everybody. I'm Dave Lynch. I'm the city manager here in the city of Newton Falls, Ohio. Welcome to our morning briefing here in the coronavirus era. We do these at 7:30 in the morning, and after today, they'll only be twice a week. That is Tuesday mornings and Friday mornings. Again, right around 7:30 in the morning and usually around 15 minutes. Well, things in Newton Falls are beginning to open up again based on the information we're getting from Columbus. This coming Wednesday, the 10th of June, we will be allowing the playgrounds to be opened up for the kids to play on again. Now, it's been a long time, and those of you who've been to our community park have seen the yellow tape. But what we're asking people to do is remember these social distancing requirements. So the playgrounds will be open for the kids to play on again. And as a matter of fact, very shortly, we have brand new playground equipment coming to Newton Falls by virtue of a special grant that our finance director, Anna Musson, was able to negotiate for the city. So that's all good. But let's face it, with little kids, there's going to have to be some parental management to keep the social distancing in place. So just keep an eye on that. I think it's pretty tough to keep toddlers away from one another, but do the very best you can because that helps us to continue to flatten the curve. And in addition, other things are opening up. Yesterday, the restrooms at the community park were opened up for the first time in a long time because obviously they were closed during the winter as well. If you smell the odor of bleach, it's because we've been sanitizing like crazy. And respect those restrooms. We want to make sure they're treated with love and care because during these days of hot humidity, it's easy for the restrooms to need some TLC on a very frequent basis. But our staff people really don't get back to that until the week starts again. So treat our restrooms with as much tender, loving care as you can. And we'll continue to sanitize them. And things are opening up even to the point where this weekend, and this is one of the reasons why we opened up the restrooms, adult softball is beginning tomorrow, Sunday, in Newton Falls. So there are signs of things opening up again, but let's be careful and intentional in the way we do things. The governor even allowed some new information to come forward about golf tournaments that are going to be going forward, professional golf tournaments. And of course, they're going to be following a special protocol. So things are opening up. Outdoor activities are especially welcome because the coronavirus does not do well in the sunlight and does not do well when the winds and breezes are dissipating the various bacteriological elements that otherwise might be coming from your nose and your mouth. As a matter of fact, related to that, if the weather permits, we'll have that next council meeting outside again. It was a great rousing success because we had elements that fight against the virus, sunlight and wind. Although it's my understanding that half of the wind was created by all the politicians and their talking. In any case, that meeting will be on June 15th. And all indications from AccuWeather are that we will have it outside of the football stadium at 6 o'clock in the evening. So come one, come all. We want you to participate in the open aspect of our government. Well, there's one aspect of our government that has actually been of great concern to me over the last several days, and it is culminating in a slogan which, quite frankly, I find disturbing. Now, I've said over and over again, we embrace the First Amendment, freedom of speech. In fact, it's one of the reasons why we have a country. We wanted the chance to tell King George what he was doing wrong. And when King George didn't listen, we seized upon our own freedoms in the Revolutionary War led by George Washington. However, one of the things that George Washington would not stand for, and that was anarchy. That is complete dissipation of the rule of law. In fact, George Washington, once he became president, was very firm on that concept. Well, the concern that I have today has been the slogan bouncing around some of the city halls in the world, in the United States, mostly in the big cities. And that slogan is defund the police. Well, the police department is the organization that separates the city of Newton Falls from complete insurrection and lawlessness. And you know that old phrase, we are a government of laws and not of men. And that's why the duty of a police officer is a sacred one, to protect our freedoms, and we need the police. So I thought I'd go right to the top of law enforcement in Newton Falls. And on our live line is the gentleman with more law enforcement experience than just about anybody that I know. And I know a lot of people. That's our Chief of Police, Gene Fixler. Good morning, Chief. How are you?
Good morning, Dave. I'm doing fine, and thanks for the introduction. 48 years coming into, to be exact.
Oh, my gosh.
So, yeah, quite a bit.
48 years. You know, I used to say to my kids, I've got ties older than you are, but I don't think I have any ties as old as your service in the police service. Well, thanks for your service, Chief. Well, you heard the slogan that's bouncing around some of these city councils elsewhere in the country. I thought it was important for us to have a rational discussion about what this really means.
Well, you know, Dave, it's not quite sure what it means. I mean, it's just, I've read numerous stories on it, and every one seems to be a little more nonsense than the other. But this is what protects our freedoms, and there has to be funding. I mean, to defund, to take money away from budgets to put it into social programs and things like that. There's already money for that, and people who seek those programs, it's there for them if they in fact want it.
Yeah. Well, what's fascinating to me, Chief, is that we do spend money on important social programs, important social services, but if you don't have a police department, you probably don't have an opportunity to access those funds because of the chaos.
Well, you're right about that. I mean, we're out there to protect society. That's, I mean, whether it be for anything we do, whether it be for community relations, whether it be for responding to a crime, whatever it might be, we have to be there. The states, they supply these social service programs that these different organizations are saying, well, we have to take money from the police to put this into. It's all there. I mean, I do have to say, you know, the state of Ohio, unfortunately, in about the past 10 years, has closed several psychiatric hospitals, and it's really put the crimp on some of the things that they used to do as far as helping people with mental illness. Now a lot of these people are street people. They have nowhere to go. But our funding is just so important. It's slim to begin with, specifically in Newton Falls. We're, you know, I hate to say it, but we operate on a shoestring at the police department. We do a great job for the community, but even big cities, they don't. There's not as much waste as people think there is.
Yeah. Well, Chief, I think the other thing that's important is let's talk about the life of a police officer. The police departments all throughout the country go by a slogan, and that is to protect and to serve. But the life of a police officer, when protecting people's rights, protecting their freedoms, protecting their property, protecting their lives, in the meantime, the life of a police officer is a pretty thankless occupation, isn't it?
Well, it is. I mean, we took the oath, and we're serving people that we don't know. In most cases, we don't know these people. We never met these people. And our first encounter with them could be the greatest thing in the world, or it could be the worst thing in the world. We don't know. We're entering the unknown. And every time that radio call goes off, or every time we stop a car, or every time we see someone on the street that we have to have an encounter with. We have no idea what it's going to be, how it's going to turn out.
Yeah, Chief, about 3.5, 4 years ago, an officer made a normal stop for a traffic offense. And while he was standing there communicating with a citizen on a normal traffic stop, somebody came flying by. It was a young man who was zoned out on drugs and drinking. That young man was from Mentor, Ohio, so I know you know the case I'm talking about. And that officer was killed. But that possibility exists every time an officer responds to the scene of either a traffic offense or a domestic violence or anything. It's wandering into the darkness of the unknown, not knowing if tomorrow morning you'll be alive, isn't it?
It is, and that particular case was on State Route 2 in Mentor, and he was a victim basically of a traffic crash that shouldn't have happened. He was in a safe zone, and the vehicle came by, and because of the impairment of the driver, essentially just ran the officer over. Similar case happened in Cleveland, Officer Fahey, a couple
Right.
years
I
ago,
remember that.
and then just a couple months before that, a state trooper in that same area on Interstate 90 in the Lakewood area, the same thing, and these were all impaired drivers. So yeah, when we stop a car, we don't know. We don't know. We try to take all the safety precautions we possibly can.
Yeah. Well, look, the officers out there trying to help, and probably one of the most prominent examples is retired police captain Dorn decided to keep his uniform and also continue to serve in the St. Louis area. And when all these violent terrorist protesters were having their way, somebody shot and killed him just a few days ago.
Yeah, that was he's 77 years old, and he was actually protecting a pawn shop for a friend of his. And you said the word right, terrorists, because there's one thing about protesting. If that's the American way. If you have something to say, it's freedom of speech. You say it, but you're doing it in a peaceful way. But to loot stores, to take lives, as they did with this retired officer in St. Louis, unbelievable. It's just totally unbelievable what's going on. And then in the back of people's mind is those images, remain of what happened in Cleveland last Saturday. Those images remain in people's minds, and then sometimes people say, "Well, you're stereotyping somebody." Well, in somebody's mind is, wow, what is this all about? So when you think of protesting, it has nothing to do with color of skin. It has to do with, gosh, there's protests. That means there's going to be rioting and looting, and loss of life and injuries and such.
Yeah, Chief.
So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the other thing I was going to mention is that what the public doesn't know, and I want you to address, our police officers are trained in the principles of protecting the Constitution. In other words, our officers know that to make a stop, you have to have probable cause. They know that the Fourth Amendment protects against warrantless searches, so they're trained to know those guidelines, and they're also interested in protecting someone's freedom of speech. So these are not people that just toss on a uniform, handed a gun and a badge, and said, go out there and do the best you can. These are professionals, aren't they, Chief, that know the constitutional rights of citizens.
They know the constitutional rights, and they're fair to people. And, and I'll speak specifically for our own officers in Newton Falls. And I have to tell you, we have one good police department. Sure, there's people who have had some encounters that haven't been as well as one would expect, as far as in someone's own opinion. But the officer goes out there, he does his job to the best he can, and but he will never disrespect anybody's constitutional rights. And we do training. We do a lot of online training. Some of the officers we have quite a bit of experience, and there's some that are newer officers, but they're taking the lead of some of the senior officers. And whether it be Newton Falls or whether it be in Cleveland or whether it be in Youngstown, there's the officers. Everybody cares about what they do. There's nobody comes in with the attitude, I'm going to hurt somebody today. I'm going to take somebody's life today. They come into work to help people, to assist the community, to make the community a better and safer place for everybody in the American way, in the freedom of the American way.
Yeah, Chief, the officers also get very specific training in the use of deadly force. In other words, the fact that an officer has a weapon with him is something that officer is trained to take very seriously and to be extremely judicious and careful in the application of deadly force. Isn't that a pretty fair statement about our officers?
Dave, anywhere, deadly force has very specific guidelines. But unfortunately, that the guidelines for that, in a split second, there has to be a decision made whether to use that deadly force in that split second. Because if you don't act quickly and responsibly, I have to say, it could result in the injury or death of either the officer or the person you've encountered, or an innocent person who might be standing by. So, yeah, the use of deadly force, I mean, that is the ultimate. However, it is protected when it's lawfully. It's protected on behalf of law enforcement when it's lawfully used.
By the way, on that score, let's put some hard opinions out there right now. The investigation is certainly not complete, but the vast majority of police that I've spoken with, almost to a man and a woman, indicate that what happened to George Floyd in Minneapolis is not something that officers condone.
Dave, I watched that, and I can only watch it twice. I have to say, I was not. It's very hurtful to watch that and what happened. I don't agree with the way it happened, but I have to hear the whole story too as to why
Sure.
he was in that position. Now, what I will say is that there was another officer there that said put him on his side, and the officer that was holding him by his neck refused. And I would say that if they would have put him on his side, I mean, it's been mentioned that he had been spitting. Needless to say, nobody wants to be spat upon, and it winds up that the gentleman had the coronavirus, and I'll say had. How active it was at the time, I don't know. But if that was known, and for all I know, he was yelling, stay away from me, I've got the coronavirus, whatever. And he's spitting. Well, you don't want him spitting at you. No. But there had to be another way.
Yes.
I wasn't there, but anybody who watches cops on TV or live PD, anything such as that, they see what an officer goes through, and sometimes you have to hold people in a way that you yourself aren't going to get injured. But what happened in Minneapolis, I watched it twice, and I just couldn't watch it no more.
Yeah.
It's like you're watching somebody die. I mean, it's the vision we get when the airplane hit the World Trade Center. What you did is you watch people die right at that point, be it on the airplane, be it in the building, and it's something that'll never ever leave your mind. And I honestly probably will never forget the image I saw of of Mr. Floyd essentially being murdered at that point.
Yeah. And that is the universal response I've gotten from officers. People forget a police officer under that uniform, there's a human heart with experiences of a human life with children and wives and mortgage payments and all the same issues the rest of us face. So they can relate to us. And most officers, every officer I've spoken to that watches the video, it breaks their heart because it makes their job harder. Because in the meantime, on a statistical basis, police officers generally, in Newton Falls in particular, but throughout the country, have a pretty good record of exercising their duties in a way that's racially neutral. Isn't that a pretty fair statement, Chief?
It's very fair. I mean, you know what? We go out there, and I'll speak for myself. I'm colorblind. You know, it doesn't matter what the color of your skin is. We're going to treat you the same. And as anybody, we're going to treat you with respect. And that's what it's all about, is treating with respect. And when you talk about an officer having a heart, we have actually three things that we depend on. And that's our two ears and our heart. And we want to listen. And when we're done listening, then we put our heart into it. And with almost 48 years doing this, I've obviously done something right. And I worked the east side suburbs, Cleveland, for the majority of my career, 29 years. And I was with the state for 7 years. And of course, I was a chief in another community, and now almost 8 years in Newton Falls. And I'm obviously doing something right, but it's listening to people and having a heart and listening to them and hearing what they have to say.
Well, on our screen right now is one of the pictures of your receipt of one of the AAA Traffic Safety Awards. And you guys just do a great job, Chief. And on behalf of our community, thank you to you and to all of the men in blue that get into that black and white car not knowing what is to be expected of them throughout the course of that night. You know, Jack Nicholson in that movie, A Few Good Men, he looks the military jury in the eye and he says, "You want us on that wall." That's the truth, Chief. We want you on that wall. That wall is what separates our families from crime and violence. And without the police officers, that wall crumbles. And we owe our freedoms and our lives to some extent to the bravery that you and these young men and women that you lead exercise here in Newton Falls. So thank you so much, Chief.
Well, David, thank you for calling in on this. It's an important issue. I don't really want to say it's going to be a hot button issue, but it's going to be a new buzzword, defunding the police. But it's not going to happen. It can't happen. And it's just like a hot issue right now. But police departments aren't going to be disbanded. It's just not the American way. And if that would ever happen, why the military would have to come in, and then it's considered war. As far as that goes, if the military comes in and takes over all of basically your freedoms, and we never want to see that in this country. But I thank the people of Newton Falls. I'll tell you what, we have such a good community that comes together all the time, no matter what the occasion is. Everybody comes together in Newton Falls, and again, we're not 100% liked by everybody as the police department, but I'll tell you what, for the majority of people care about us. They care about their police department, and I will say we're there for them. We're there to serve them.
Well, outstanding job, Chief, and peace and good health to you, your family, and to all the families and individuals of those in the family of the Newton Falls Police Department. You have a great weekend.
You too, Dave. Thanks.
All right. That was Chief Gene Fixler. Only 48 years in law enforcement. I'm hoping we can have many years more. Well, that brings to the conclusion another one of our broadcasts. I thought it was important for us to hear from the police chief in this very difficult time. We've had some commentary over the last week about that, but hearing directly from the leadership of our police department, I thought was important. Respect for the uniform and the badge is something that all of us need to present to the rest of the community because they are putting themselves at risk all the time. People criticize the police because they do traffic enforcement up until the time that a member of their family is killed by a drunk driver on the road, or a person that goes by a school bus and kills a child. So if you think, well, that's just a minor thing, they shouldn't do traffic enforcement. It saves lives. They respond to a call for domestic violence in which frequently there's alcohol involved and the person in that home may have a weapon. That's walking into a powder keg. You wouldn't do that, but the Newton Falls police officers do that. Let's be thankful to them. Well, that's the end of another one of our broadcasts. Stay in touch with our Heavenly Father. Enjoy the fact that we're beginning to open up our economy again. Playgrounds opening on Wednesday, softball starting tomorrow, and the meeting of the 15th outdoors again with weather permitting. So as I say at the conclusion each time, God bless America and God bless the city of Newton Falls.